Welcome to Engage with Eagle Forum, a podcast to encourage the modern day woman in her vital role in shaping society. I'm one of your hosts, Tabitha Walter, the political director of Eagle Forum, and I'm joined by our executive director, Kirsten Hassler.
Hi, everyone. Well, we've made it to the end of season 1 of Engage with Eagle Forum. After 46 episodes, we are taking a break for the holidays. This is our season finale, where we wrap up everything that we've done over the year and let you peek into our lives behind the scenes. So let's start from the very beginning. Tabitha, what were your thoughts going into this?
Oh, it's certainly been one heck of a year. I mean, I think we all know that, and I think it's said enough. But we never predicted what this year would look like. And so in January, when you and Glenn mentioned the podcast to me, I honestly thought it was just you and Glenn doing the podcast and that I would just help out wherever I could. And in my mind, like, I had never done a podcast before, and I was thinking there's no way I could talk long enough or talk about something like interesting enough to make a podcast worthwhile. And so, and just a little backgrounder, I had come back to Eagle Forum after I had worked for Eagle Forum a little over 2 years. And then I took another job elsewhere for about 6 months. And then, long story short, it was an awful fit for me. And I thought I had just wasted 6 months of my life by making a terrible move. It was like one of those things where it was like, God, did I not hear you right? Did I just do this like out of my own flesh? But little did I know that the things I learned at that job would go hand in hand with this podcast. So it wasn't a complete waste, and actually extremely beneficial for this year. So, I mean, you know, like, when you go through an awful season in life, you often tread into the next venture very carefully. And sometimes you bring some insecurities from that last season in with you. And that's where I was. But both you and Glenn were so encouraging to me every step of the way. And I remember Glenn texting me after an episode saying something like, "You are such an amazing communicator." And that was something that I wanted to achieve, but I felt like I wasn't quite reaching my potential yet. And so that really pushed me to keep going and help develop this passion in me for this podcast. So fast forward to today, and I'm not just talking with you on this podcast, but I'm also editing videos, creating memes, and managing social media pages. And these are things that I thought I would never do in a million years. I mean, I didn't go to college for this. I'm not trained in this by any means. But I've learned a lot, and it's been such a creative outlet for me, which has been great this year because there hasn't been like a lot of positive things throughout the year. And so truthfully, like, it's something that I have been able to direct my energy into during a time that's exhausting and depressing. And, you know, if you listen to anything else, you would think the world was coming to an end. But it's been a light this year for me, and I've had so much fun doing it. So that was long-winded, but those are my feelings on it. What about you, Kirsten?
I'll talk a little bit about the idea behind our podcast. I don't know if we've ever really talked about that on the show, but you know, we've been brainstorming. I guess this past year, so it was about a year ago now. We were brainstorming ways to connect with a younger audience and people who may have never heard of Eagle Forum. So we wanted a way to be able to communicate our mission and our vision for not only the country but also for individuals. And we thought, well, what about a podcast? That'd be a great way to do that. And so I don't think, like, looking back, I would have ever thought that we would actually record 46 episodes. And then on top of that, about halfway in, maybe a little bit before the halfway mark, we started adding the YouTube video to it. And that was a whole nother aspect of it. Just a lot of behind the scenes in terms of the work that goes into creating a live episode. so that, I think that has been really cool to come see that vision come into fruition. And we definitely have been able to, not only we talk about some fun things sometimes, we had that Kardashian episode, which is really fun, but we've also gotten to talk about a lot of really heavy and important things like, like race issues or gender ideology and the 1619 project. These are things that are not easy to talk about, but we've been able to talk about them. And I think in a very easily digestible ways. And that's been really, really rewarding for me. And so I hope that our episodes have really helped encourage our listeners, or you, our listeners, to understand the political landscape and then also feel comfortable enough to talk about it and maybe even to engage in it.
Yeah, I agree. I was just along for the ride at the beginning, and now I'm like neck deep in engaged with Eagle Forum podcast.
Yeah, I think we went in also not realizing just the amount of work that it takes. But it's always fun, and
yeah. Speaking of, like, we as time has went on, we've looked into like what's the best technology to use, or what is Zoom good to use, or is this microphone the best microphone we can get right now. And we still don't have like the grandest setup. Like right now my laptop is literally on two boxes, a shoebox and like a Christmas box. And so it's very amateur, but that should be encouraging to anyone who's like thinking about doing a podcast. It can be as simple as you make it, and it can really be an outlet for you. And so try it out, like give it a try, and there are no expectations. So be encouraged in that. We are at home, we have kids, I have two cats that run around like crazy, and so we're working around that, and all the political news that's coming down endlessly. And so it's it's an adventure, to say the least. So let's talk about some of our episodes now. Of course, we don't have the time to go through every episode, although we love everyone, but we are going to highlight some of our favorites. And we are going to talk about some of the ones that just stuck with us. So first, Kirsten, what was the one that you learned the most from?
I think going into the episode, in terms of all the research that we do to prepare for an interview that we have, was definitely the one on the Electoral College that we did with Trent England from the Save Our States Coalition. I think a lot of people, and myself included, I like knew what the Electoral College was, but I didn't really have a very firm understanding of why it exists. So that one has definitely stuck with me. It served me well. I've actually been in communication with Trent a few times since, because I've seen some of the repercussions from 1619 Project, which is also another great episode, seep into the Electoral College. So for example, after the election, I saw this, what is it called? Like an Instagram post of a graphic that said the Electoral College is a remnant of slavery. And I was like, what? That's not right. But I'm so thankful that we had that episode so that I could really go back and listen to it and be like, okay, well, these are all the reasons why the Electoral College was created. It wasn't to advance slavery. So that's one that's really stuck with me. I really enjoyed that episode. But anyways, I think that episode has been a great resource for me. And it really actually did teach me something. So what about you, Tabitha?
Yeah, so mine was probably episode 34 on mail-in voting with Hans von Spakovsky. And this was obviously a huge issue this year.
Yeah.
And, I would venture to say, seeing the long lines and how long people waited to vote in person, this could be an issue that both Republicans and Democrats agreed on this year, that it was much safer and much more dependable to vote in person than it was to mail in your ballot. But I have several meetings that I go to with Hans, and he's just so intelligent on these issues, and he speaks so well. And so I loved having him on. He had so many facts and examples of ways that people undermine our election process and make it untrustworthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's actively trying to bridge that gap and make sure that people vote in a way that they can trust our electoral process.
Yeah.
And then, if you listen to the episode, if you weren't convinced to vote in person before this episode, it certainly changed your mind. And as much as I did not want to stand in line for hours, this episode really solidified that decision for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I stood in line for an hour to vote, which isn't bad. I've heard worse stories, but a lot of people took pride in standing in line because we have that right, and as women, we didn't always have that right, and so I think a lot of people took their vote seriously this year, and a lot of people voted for the first time. So, it was a good year for that people used their voice, and they did it in a way that is more dependable than just sending their ballot through the mail, unless you live in a state, of course, that forced you to mail in your ballot, unfortunately. But
yeah. And I think like going into that episode when you and Glenn were going to record that, I don't think we were really even thinking about how relevant that issue would be.
Yeah.
Of course, COVID, we were still thinking about COVID and that people would probably be mailing in more ballots than usual. But I mean, just the whole news cycle about it has completely, made it a very, very relevant issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's still an effort by Democrats to make it universal.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's still not over just because this election is somewhat over. We're still waiting on some outcomes of that. But just because we've already voted this year doesn't mean that this issue isn't going to end. So
yeah.
So it's definitely an episode you can listen to over and over again. Speaking of, Kirsten, what episode could you listen to over and over again?
Well, I really enjoyed our fertility awareness episodes that we did. I learned a lot through those. I hope that they were educational for you as well, listeners. The other one that I really, really loved is Challenging Pro-Life Culture with Roland Warren from CareNet. And I had actually, I think I said this in the podcast episode, I had the privilege of hearing Roland at a pregnancy center banquet a couple years ago. And I was like, we had to have him on. Like, he gives such a good talk about being pro-abundant life. And just every time I hear that message, I'm just so reminded about the hope that there still is in the pro-life cause. I think it's so easy to get frustrated because we can't even pass any bills like with any sort of pro-life protections right now in the US Congress and Senate. And that just sometimes feels so defeating. But we have so much opportunity to help influence an actual cultural change that, I felt hope again. So that was a great episode. And it's one that it's filled with hope and positivity and action items for making that happen.
Mm-hmm. That was top of my list too.
Mm-hmm.
And to Roland, you guys didn't see the behind the scenes conversation, but he stuck around afterwards and had a really great conversation with us. And so, he's just a genuine person who's really passionate about the pro-life issue, and it's good to see that.
Yeah. What about you?
Mine would be episode 32, which is Neighboring During COVID with Matthew Gillette. Now, Matt is a good friend of mine, so I was super excited to have him on. So this has been an issue that I've been really passionate about for the last several years since I moved to the DC area. I live in Alexandria, Virginia, and my church is super involved in the community, and we're very much like an outward looking congregation where we're always finding opportunities to help the community, and not just in ways that we think of, but in ways that they think of, because it's important to meet the needs that they have instead of what we conjure up ourselves. And so we're having a lot of conversations in the community, and just, being a part of the community. And it's a very much a learning process all the time. But since COVID hit, it's been really hard to navigate those waters and figuring out, like, how do I still cultivate a relationship with my neighbor? It's hard enough to cultivate relationships with your friends, your close friends, and your family that don't live with you. And so that's been a difficult journey this year for everyone. Um, and then in that same episode, we talked about how to talk to people who have different views than you. And we know, like, the political landscape is just getting more and more divided. And, like, to the point where people are viewing you based on which party you subscribe to, or which person you voted for, or if you consider yourself pro-life or pro-choice, or, there's so many labels now, and information is so abundant. We're, like, telling all of our secrets on Facebook and social media now. And so everyone knows everything about everyone, it seems. So how do we have those conversations with people who are different than us? And that's an episode that I can listen to over and over again, because I need that reminder. And I think it's good to put things into perspective. When I'm feeling like I'm not doing enough in my community, or when I feel like, this person on my Facebook is just unbearable with their incessant memes or something, it's good to calm down and listen to how to reframe that, and how God really sees us, and how God originally created the neighborhood for us to thrive in.
So we've tackled some really timely and important issues this season, like race, COVID, feminism, transgenderism, women's empowerment through fertility awareness, election outcomes, integrity, and education, just to name a few. So what was it like talking about these issues, Tabitha, for you?
Well, me being someone who likes to see things from all sides, these conversations weren't always easy, because it's almost like I'm outing myself as a conservative. And I would tell anyone who asked that I was a conservative, or that, or who I voted for. I think one person close to me asked who I voted for this year. And so, it's hard for me, because I like to welcome everyone in, and I like having diverse friends and diversity of thought, people who can feel free to speak their mind around me. And so some of the issues were easy, like fertility awareness, or like the Equal Rights Amendment. Those are things that I'm passionate about, and I don't mind. I feel like I know those well enough that I can speak it intelligently and clearly enough to where I'm not just, blabbering on. But others were somewhat uncomfortable for me, like the transgenderism issue and race issues. And, I'm still in the posture of learning about those issues. And I understand that they're very sensitive. So I wanted to approach those issues with kindness and empathy, but also truth. And that's a hard line to walk these days. Sometimes it doesn't matter what you say, people are going to view it as wrong. And you just have to live with that, essentially. And I've written on these issues a lot, like in our Capitol Hill update, or through op-eds or something like that. And it's a lot easier to leave those feelings on paper and walk away than it is to discuss them, because then there's a lot more emotion behind that. And but I just kept remembering something that my mom always taught me, is that you should stand up for what is right, even if you're shaking in your boots. And there have been times where I've been super nervous to start a podcast because I wanted to get it right. I understand like how important it is for people to hear this, because people need encouragement. They need the words to talk about it well with others.
Mm-hmm.
And we may look like we know exactly what we're talking about on these episodes, but I can guarantee you that we are also learning at the same time. You know, it takes a lot of research and crafting what we're going to say and what we're going to ask our guests who are on this show. And so we put a lot of thought. We make sure that we're crafting it well for our audience, but we also make sure that we're learning about these at the same time. So, but Kirsten is a lot smarter than me, so I'm sure it's easier for her.
That's so not true. You know, it's not true. No, I think this has been a learning experience for both of us, and yeah, like what you said, it's not always easy, but it has been enjoyable, and it's definitely been educational.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, so looking on to next season, which hopefully will air early 2021, which is just crazy that we are coming on to January. I mean, where does the year go?
I know.
What are you thinking we're going to tackle next year, Tabitha?
So there's so many issues that I'm thinking about, but I know like things will pop up that we didn't even plan for. So we have to leave room for that. Some of it's a mystery, but I think we will continue the conversation about some of our most popular episodes, because that tells us when hundreds of people are viewing an episode that they want that information, and so we can continue that conversation. But some of those issues would be on transgenderism, fertility awareness, and then we also want to talk more about human trafficking. I think that's an issue that is continuing to crop up and becoming more in the spotlight. And so we want to make sure that that continues to be heard. And we're already setting up some conversations with guests, so that'll be fun. And we also have this amazing achievement that we can't pass up, with 14 new pro-life women joining Congress. So we are hoping that we can bring some of their voices to you, and you can learn about some of those congresswomen who are making a difference in the new Congress. So what else? What are you thinking, Kirsten?
Well, I definitely think, you know, I'll be excited to learn if and when President Biden becomes president, what his goals will be for his first 100 days in office. You know, usually that really sets up the next 4 years. So, I mean, obviously, I think that we could probably expect some sort of COVID relief if it continues to increase. He's already mentioned that he'd like to pass the Equality Act, so we'll be bringing that back full circle again. Of course, there's the always ongoing budget issues. And then, you know, be interested to see if he does anything else related to, you know, paid family leave. I don't really know, but it would be really interested to see what his goals for the first 100 days are, and we can go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I heard House Democrats are pressuring Biden to do some massive student loan relief. And so, as wonderful as that sounds for someone like me who has student loans, there are major consequences for that. And so maybe that's something that we need to hone in on next year. Yeah. So wrapping up, in the wrap up, we can't end this podcast without thanking all of you who are the reason this podcast exists and is still going. You are responsible for nearly 6,300 downloads and over 4,300 views on YouTube. Now, keep in mind, we didn't record by video for 19 episodes.
That's awesome.
It's awesome. You just blow us away. We are so thankful for that. And we truly hope that you've learned something along the way with us during this year. And we cannot wait to start another season with you all. If we impacted you in any way, could you leave us a review and tell us, you know, what impacted you? And maybe you're left hanging about something. Tell us that too. Like, what more information would you like to hear from us? We want all the things from you guys. We want your opinion, and we want your voice in the mix too. So that would be the perfect Christmas gift for us. But we hope that you have a happy Thanksgiving, a Merry Christmas, and a wonderful New Year.
And this is the end of season 1. From your house to the State House to the White House, this is Engage with Eagle Forum.